Have you ever had an experience so unsettling that it stays with you forever? This is one such story, a night I'll never forget. It all began at the pizza place where I worked. It was almost closing time, and I was wrapping things up, eager to go home. Then the phone rang. I was alone at the counter that night, so it was up to me to answer. I picked it up. Silence. At first, I thought it was a prank call, so I hung up. But about a minute later, the phone rang again. Frustrated, I answered it once more. Silence. But just as I was about to hang up, I heard it, a faint, cold voice. It sounded like an old woman. She softly requested a regular pizza for delivery. I stayed polite on the call, but inside, I was groaning. I just wanted my shift to end. I called out to my boss, telling him about the delivery request. To my annoyance, he said I had to handle it. Initially upset, I soon reconsidered. Old customers usually tipped well, so I figured it wouldn't be too bad. After taking down the address, I told the woman her pizza would be there soon. But before I could finish, she abruptly hung up. Rude, I thought, but whatever. I relayed the order to the chef, and my boss told me to head straight home after the delivery since the shop would close by the time I got back. By 10 p.m., I was in my car with the address plugged into my GPS. It wasn't far, about 7 miles away, but the route led me to the quieter side of town. The kind of place where streetlights are scarce, and the silence feels heavier than usual. When I arrived, I was greeted by a small, dark house on an eerily empty block. No porch lights. No signs of life. Still, I grabbed the pizza and walked up to the door. I rang the bell. Nothing. I rang again. Still nothing. Just as I was about to give up, something caught my eye, a figure standing by the window. Startled, I took a step back, my heart racing. But curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously approached the window to get a closer look. There she was, an old woman, probably in her late 70s. Her expression was blank, almost lifeless, as she stared directly at me. I tried to keep calm and called out, "I've got your pizza." She didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring. Frustrated, I shouted louder, "Your pizza is here." And then it happened, a smile. But not a warm, welcoming smile. It was the kind of smile that could freeze your blood. Wide, unnatural, and chilling. That was it. I decided I was done. I backed away, returned to my car, and placed the pizza on the passenger seat. Shaken, I pulled out my phone to text my boss about what happened. But as I started typing, I felt something. A presence. I looked to my right, and there she was. She was standing right outside my passenger window, staring at me with that same terrifying smile. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I started my car, threw it into drive, and sped off without looking back. The pizza still in the passenger seat. When I finally got far enough away, I pulled over and called my boss. I told him everything. He apologized and assured me I'd never have to do a late-night delivery again. To this day, I can't explain what happened or who that woman was. All I know is that smile still haunts me every time I think about it. So, if you're ever out late at night, alone, and something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. Sometimes, it's better to leave the pizza undelivered. This story happened 4 years ago, back when I was still in high school. I was working a part-time job as a pizza delivery driver, and it was a pretty typical evening shift, until it wasn't. It all started when my boss told me to take one last delivery before heading home. I grabbed the pizza, hopped into my trusty 1999 Camry, and punched the address into my phone's GPS. Living in upstate New York, deliveries often meant long drives through remote country roads. This one was no different. The sun was just starting to set, casting long shadows across the forest-lined roads. It was probably around 7 p.m. when I finally left the main road and turned onto a bumpy dirt path. After about 15 minutes of driving through dense woods, my GPS announced, "You have arrived." I looked up to see an old weathered cottage sitting alone in the middle of nowhere. It was the kind of place you'd see in a horror movie, made almost entirely of wood, with an overgrown lawn that reached up to my knees. I stepped out of my car with the pizza, feeling a strange unease settle over me. But I was used to weird, secluded houses, so I brushed it off and made my way to the front door. When I reached it, I noticed the door had a peephole and there was no doorbell. I knocked loudly and waited. Within seconds, I heard footsteps, heavy ones, approaching from inside. The footsteps stopped right behind the door. I froze. Something about the way the footsteps stopped felt off. Like someone was standing there, silently watching me through the peephole. "It's the pizza guy," I called out, trying to sound cheerful. For a moment, there was silence. Then a low, raspy voice responded, "Bring it out back." Instantly, my gut told me something wasn't right. I hesitated. "Are you sure, sir?" I called back, hoping for some reassurance. But there was no response. The footsteps didn't retreat, they just stayed there. I could feel the weight of someone's gaze on me. For a brief second, I considered walking back to my car and leaving. But then I remembered the last time I returned to the pizzeria with an undelivered pizza. My boss had given me a hard time about it. I didn't want to deal with that again, so I reluctantly decided to follow the man's instructions. I walked around the side of the house, cutting through the unkempt grass. When I reached the backyard, I saw a small patio with a table and 4 chairs. In one of the chairs, someone was sitting with their back to me. "Excuse me," I called out, trying to get their attention. They didn't move. Not even a flinch. "Excuse me," I said louder this time, my voice shaking slightly. Still nothing. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Over here." I whipped around and saw a man poking his head around the corner of the house. He had a wild, crazed smile that immediately sent chills down my spine. "Come here," he said, his voice disturbingly calm. "I want to show you something." My heart was pounding. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, and that's exactly what I did. I bolted back around the house, through the tall grass, clutching the pizza like it was my lifeline. I didn't look back. I jumped into my car, started it, and sped away as fast as I could. I didn't stop driving until I was far from that house. When I finally felt safe, I pulled over to the side of the road and called the police. A few hours later, the authorities got back to me. They said the house had been abandoned for years. There was no sign of anyone living there, or anyone who had been there recently. I quit my delivery job a few days later. To this day, I can't explain what happened. But there's one thing that haunts me more than anything else. I still wish I had turned around to see who, or what, was sitting in that patio chair. Let me tell you about the night I'll never forget, the night I realized how terrifying a seemingly normal pizza delivery job could be. At the time, I was living in the Poconos, a rural and heavily wooded area where most roads are surrounded by endless trees. Late-night deliveries were part of the job, and though driving through dark, foggy roads could be eerie, I had gotten used to it. But this night was different. I was taking a shortcut to town, a road I had driven down countless times before. The fog was thick, and the darkness seemed heavier than usual. Out of nowhere, someone jumped out from the bushes and right into the road. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The sickening thud from the front of my car confirmed my worst fear. I had hit them. My heart pounded as I put my hand to my forehead, cursing under my breath. This couldn't be happening. I got out of the car to check on the person. There he was, a man in a black hoodie, lying motionless by my front tire. Panic set in. I had no idea what to do. Why had he been out here in the middle of nowhere? Why did he jump in front of my car? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. Then I heard it, a scream. It came from the woods to my left, a desperate cry for help. My first thought was that someone else was in trouble. My eyes darted back to the man lying by my car. He hadn't moved. Against my better judgment, I told myself I'd only be gone for a minute and headed toward the woods. As I walked into the darkness, the scream I'd heard was replaced by an unsettling silence. The only sounds were the chirps and rustles of night creatures. "Where are you?" I shouted, hoping for a response. That's when I heard it, a single footstep crunching the leaves behind me. I spun around and squinted into the foggy darkness. And then I saw it, a figure partially hidden behind a tree, watching me. Adrenaline took over. I turned and ran as fast as I could back to my car, my heart hammering in my chest. I kept looking back, terrified that I was being followed. When I reached my car, my blood ran cold. The man I had hit, the one who had been lying motionless, was gone. I didn't wait to figure out where he went. I jumped into my car and sped off, my hands shaking on the wheel. My heart didn't stop racing the entire drive. I finally arrived at my destination, a small house in the middle of a quiet neighborhood. I parked, grabbed the pizza, and walked up to the door. A middle-aged woman answered, paid for the pizza, and then glanced past me toward my car. With a puzzled expression, she asked, "They let you guys have delivery partners now?" Confused, I replied, "What do you mean?" She pointed toward my car. "There's someone sitting in the back seat." A wave of dread washed over me. My stomach dropped as I turned to look. Sure enough, there was a figure sitting in the back seat of my car. I froze, unsure of what to do. Somehow, I managed to keep calm enough to ask the woman if I could use her phone to call the cops. By the time the police arrived, the person in my back seat was gone. But when they searched my car, they found something that still haunts me to this day, a blood-stained knife lying on the floor where the man had been hiding. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what his intentions were. But I often think about how differently that night could have ended if I hadn't made the delivery.